And before I sentence you, I'd like to say a few words about your arrest record. What the hell?
Yo, the sign is real simple, B. It says wrap it up. Wrap that shit up, B.
I don't think that's a good idea.
Man, you want some too? You better wrap it up.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes, and I promised, and I am delivering. Perch is here to talk about Batman 3 Jokers. Obviously, we got the finale, Batman 3 Jokers, issue number 3 this week. I called it a 4-star comic. Highly recommend. Issues 1 and 2, I called 4.5-star comics. Overall, I would call this story arc, this story from DC Black Label, Geoff Johns, Jason Fabok, Brad Anderson, like an A-. Yeah. Now, did it live up to the hype? I think my expectations might have gotten in my own way here, Perch. Did you have the same issue with the comic?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's been such a funny run up to this point, and I think actually, if it had come out a year earlier, I think I would have been more disappointed because the hype started so early and ran for so long, and this title was late, that my excitement actually had started to come down when this was finally announced and I got this thing. And maybe that was a good thing, but it was a very solid book. It definitely, the delays and the hype because of the delays and kind of stringing that out, it absolutely did hurt ultimately the final product. But I suspect 10 years from now, you pick up this thing as a collected edition and we'll find a pretty damn good story.
Absolutely. So we're gonna kind of key in on 4 big areas. We're gonna talk about art, whether or not this is continuity, the big reveal that Batman has always known Joker's identity, and really what the story is all about. Then we'll do some quick hits on highs and lows in the comic, kind of like what we did with the midterm feedback on Ten of Swords. Before we get into all these details, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, subscribe, hit the bell notifications, give me the thumbs up if you enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs down if you don't. Either way, Perch and I definitely want to hear your feedback. What did you think about Batman 3 Jokers? This is an all-time classic. Was it a dud? Are you with us where you thought it was really good, but you expected it to be better? Let us know in the comment section. We definitely want to hear from you guys. So the first thing I have to talk about is the art. Normally, I would not include a cover when talking about the art, but the Fabok covers on this were so amazing that we have to just talk about that as well. But 5-star comic as far as the art, impeccable. The best comic book I've seen illustrated in 2020. The amount of detail in this thing is amazing.
No, I completely agree. I think Fabok is clearly a star creator, but this was a showcase for him. He's so at the top of his game in this. It looks really nice. It's detailed. There's not any skimping on the work. A ton of panel work. I mean, there was a lot of time that went into this, and he knocked it out of the park. I think really good characterization, characters looking how they should, the nuance of how the 3 Jokers behaved that came out through the art. I mean, Jason Fabok is one of those names that isn't kind of always thought of as a superstar artist. There's a lot of other names that often jump to mind, but he absolutely needs to be. He's easily one of the top 10 people working in the industry today, and this was an excellent looking book.
Yeah, there's so many cool little Easter eggs. There's a lot of symbolism. This panel right here, this is my favorite piece of art in the entire comic, where you have Joe Chills. It's essentially telling why he murdered Bruce Wayne's parents. As Batman is kind of dangling, helpless, and has to observe the whole thing. I just the color work by Brad Anderson on that one, like you can see the depth.
Yeah. No, it's a really well-crafted book. So, I mean, the art team, across the board, Fabok, Anderson, this is a really, really nice-looking book. And it does remind you of kind of the time and the care and the quality that would go into books. Some of the top-tier books in the 80s that you really remember as being classics. When I was reading this book, it reminded me of a lot of those kind of very, very dense, very highly detailed 80s titles that I love today still. And no, nothing but the art and the coloring and everything else is definitely an A book. And I'm with you. I'm trying to think now if there's been a better looking book this year, and I don't think so. I think this is it.
It's the top of the heap. So we got to get into one of the big things. Obviously, this idea of 3 Jokers was introduced during the Darkseid War. Batman's on the Mobius chair. He asks, what's the identity of the Joker? He's dumbfounded. It turns out he lets it out that there are actually 3 Jokers out there. And this was initially, you could tell by DC Rebirth, this was supposed to be in continuity. It was going to be part of the Rebirth story, along with Doomsday Clock. Obviously, along the way, plans changed. This became part of the pitch for DC Black Label, which has also changed, not shockingly. But at San Diego Comic-Con 2018, Geoff Johns did say this: 3 Jokers is an in-continuity story.
Mm-hmm.
It really focuses on Bruce Barber, Jason. Then he also says it's a mystery about the 3 Jokers operating at the same time and what that means. I don't see how this is an in-continuity story, and I don't think they really achieved the mystery about how 3 Jokers are operating and what it means. Do you?
Here's my explanation for this. If I was DC's marketing arm, this is how I would describe it. I would say at the moment when Bruce sat on the Mobius chair and asked the question he asked, now there is one gotcha that we'll get to in a moment, but at that moment when he sat on the chair and he asked what he asked, there were 3 Jokers at that exact moment in time, because this plot that the Joker was surfacing of trying to kind of make other versions of himself, experimenting with this chemical and everything else, that was in flight. So if he had sat on that Mobius chair, say 2 years prior, the chair would not have said there were 3 Jokers. The chair would have said there was 1. But instead, at that exact moment, this plot was going on, and the Joker was in the midst of doing all this, and that sent Bruce off on this other track to go explore this mystery and everything else. In that context, that would make sense of why, because as you reveal through this story, no, there haven't been 3 Jokers operating for decades at the same time. There's been, at some point in time, the chemical has gotten into other people. It's created a different facet of the Joker's personality, and he's experimented with that. We don't know how long that's been going on or when it began or anything else.
I thought one of them was Golden Age Joker. Obviously, that was the one that I think is the one that bashed Jason Todd's head in. We got Silver Age Joker, right?
Yep. Yeah, but keep in mind, so this is, I'm trying to, that's why I preface the thing. I'm pretending like I'm DC's marketing arm here a little bit. This doesn't make entire sense. But this is the way I would explain it. I think that, keep in mind the sliding timeline of Batman. If you forget for a moment that there's been comics for 50, 60 years or so, and you think about
it's been like 5 years.
Yeah, if you think about it being a 5-year time frame, then at some point the Joker started making clones of himself, and that would explain these different people running around and doing what they're doing and having this plot, and that's the mysteries he's uncovering. The challenge is, if you and I think about it in terms of kind of the Golden Age and the Silver Age, and there being decades in between this, it makes no sense from that perspective. So it really depends on what you're kind of buying into. And I know a bunch of people in your comments are going to absolutely say I'm full of crap with everything I said, but I'm
going to say you're full of crap. How's that?
There you go. There you go. That's the only way I can wrap my head around this. That if I'm DC's marketing arm, that's how I'm explaining it's an in-continuity story right there.
All right. Well, I'm still not buying it. It's fine. It didn't need to be in continuity. It is Black Label. I'm disappointed that it isn't a part of Rebirth, that they kind of abandoned that plan. I would have preferred that, but hey, if you have to have Jason or Geoff Johns go outside of continuity of Jason Fabok to write a story, I'm fine with it. Just don't say it's in continuity.
I don't think they need to say anything either way. I think they could have just said, here's a story, and it's the Batman solving a mystery of what's going on with the Joker, and you can just leave it there. And I think that would, because now I think you're putting up the page that immediately contradicts the excuse that I was crafting there for DC, which is when Batman sits on the chair, he asks who the Joker is. Mm-hmm. But later we learn he's known who the Joker was the entire time. So what's
1 week after he met it?
A week after he met the Joker. So is Batman then trying to again? This is where I feel like I'm DC's PR department. Is maybe the explanation there is that Batman's trying to validate that the chair knows its stuff, and so it's asking the chair a question he can validate the answer to. I guess. But then that doesn't kind of correspond with the 3 Jokers answer that comes next. So I'm with you. I think they should just not call it in continuity, out of continuity. Just it's a story and roll it out. And
DC Black Label.
Yeah, it's just leave it there. Just it could be what it is.
So I'm glad I'm not the only one that had an issue. Obviously, Batman's on the Mobius chair. What's the name of the 3 Joker, or is Joker's true name? Then he says, "I've known his true name since a week after I met him." Like,
yeah.
Well, then why did he ask? Like, it's Batman Bruce Wayne. It's not like he doubts himself.
Yeah, and there you go. I mean, the only thing I can go with is maybe he was trying to validate Chair knew what it was doing. I don't know why he would do that at that particular moment. It's a very strange choice since he's been imbued with this power already. That would be weird that he wants to test it, but why not? I thought this last bit of Three Jokers, if I had one issue with the whole 3-issue run, it's like they didn't need this last bit. I understand,
More harm than good.
Yeah, they're trying to connect it to Killing Joke, and I get that. And that's admirable that you're trying to tie these stories together, I suppose, but it didn't need to happen. I think this couple pages, you had a pretty good case, you had a pretty good kind of haunting message from the Joker. There's kind of you could have even spent these last 2 pages maybe teasing that there are other Jokers out there that escape somehow and they can come back to haunt him. There's a lot of things you could have done, but this last bit was meant to kind of tie things up, and I think it fails by and large.
Yeah. So, okay, Perch thinks he's calibrating the Mobius chair.
I don't know,
but I think we both had the same issues. But so overall, this is a character-driven story. This isn't. It's a mystery. Yes, Batman is doing detective things, and we're going to get to that. But this is all about trauma, the trauma that's been inflicted on Bruce Wayne, through Joe Chill, and then later what Joker has done to his understudies, the trauma that Joker inflicted on Jason Todd, basically turning him into the Red Hood and causing friction between him and Bruce, who thought he was dead. The trauma that was inflicted on Barbara Gordon during the Killing Joke when she was paralyzed, became Oracle, and the way that the 3 different characters deal with the trauma. Obviously, this has been tried before, even recently with Tom King. This is eminently more successful. You can tell that Geoff Johns just gets the characters and the DC setting better. Yeah.
No, I mean, the characterization, so forgetting for a moment everything we just said that people are upset with me about at this point, putting that aside for the moment, I think that Geoff Johns really understands the characterization here of Barbara and Jason Todd and Bruce and kind of the traumas that each have faced and kind of how they've all responded to it differently. And I mean, it was most glaring with the fact that you had Batgirl 50 come out the same day as this comic. And if you look at the handling of Barbara Gordon here and kind of how she is dealing with her trauma and becoming tougher and stronger through that trauma, it's not only great character development, it rings true for who that character is. And it really makes the character stronger and more powerful. And you contrast that with what happened in Batgirl 50 the same day. And there is just a weak, piss poor version of how to handle a character. I mean, it just could not be more night and day. And, Geoff Johns, for whatever else you think about him, whether you love him, you hate him, anything else, he clearly understands characters, even with the kind of the missteps from before.
Absolutely. So if you're coming into this and you're expecting balls to the wall action, there is some of that. But if you were expecting a character-driven story, which Geoff Johns said in interviews, this is about the trauma that Bruce and Jason and Barbara have experienced, and that is absolutely what he delivered. And I think he did it very wonderfully. There's like I said, there's a few issues with it. Like we both kind of had some issues with the ending. We'll kind of get through that. But overall, this is very, very, very good comic book.
It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So getting to like the 3 highs, the 3 things that kind of stood out in my mind, if we just think about the things that really popped to me. The first one is I love Batman doing Batman things. When I say Batman things, I mean detective work. Going in there, seeing the clues, seeing where that leads him, not being so overly reliant on technology that answers everything for him. Leaning a little bit on Alfred here and there, leaning on his family, working together. I like the mystery element of it. I do think the star of the book is Jason Todd. Obviously Batman plays a huge part in it, but that moment when he sees the way that Barbara dealt with her experience with Joker when she was paralyzed and her father was there for her the whole time, and she went through pain management. Obviously, he's had that. It was like heartbreaking.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the growth of Jason Todd's character and everything that he's put together here, you've got just some much needed. I mean, Jason Todd in general has been, yes, he's been in the Red Hood book and the Outlaws and everything else, but we haven't really bridge the gap between this time in his life and kind of what he went through and what he suffered from in quite the way they did it here. And I think the handling was extremely solid for him. I just, again, great character build up, all three characters. This is a kind of title that you wish more comics were like this, where all characters benefited coming out the end of it. They all have gotten more depth, more nuance, more complexity to their characters. It's this was a character strengthening book.
Absolutely. And then the last thing I enjoyed, I think some people might disagree with me on this. I did like the element of making Batman go and re-examine Joe Chill. You know, the clues led him to Joe Chill in Blackgate, into his cell. This is like, you have to be here to investigate this. Obviously, that was part of the Joker's plan, but you know, he ends up talking to like the psychologist in there. It turns out Joe Chill had a learning disability, but he's been wanting to write a sorry letter to Bruce Wayne for decades, and he couldn't finish it because he didn't know the words. And you find out, is Joe Chill a murderer? Yes. Is Joe Chill a bad guy? Yes. Is Joe Chill the personification of evil? No, he's not. He was he was a desperate person in a desperate situation, did something very wrong that, you know, in many ways ruined Bruce Wayne's life, but gave him purpose, you know, to go and save many others. But I did like the reconciliation that he got with Joe Chill.
Yeah, it felt like that was a key moment, obviously, in Bruce and Batman's history and past, that they were able to close the door on and really do some good work with. So, and it was also nice that they let that character come to an end through this book. You know, there was this tease of like, oh, we're going to put Joe Chill into the vat and make him a Joker as well, and all the rest. And you can see other writers, less talented writers, wanting to keep Joe Chill alive or turn him into a bigger villain or kind of fuse him with a cyborg for some crazy ass reason or whatever you're going to do. And instead, it showed the strength of the writing here, that they just let the character expire and have it be meaningful to Batman's life and have it be, you know, some level of redemption without also going the other way of like revealing that Bruce's dad had secretly screwed over Joe Chill in some weird fashion. And so he's actually a sympathetic character. They let him just be bad. They let him kind of redeem himself at his death, and they let him die. And that became meaningful to the story and to what Bruce is, rather than try and shoehorn in some other crazy ass thing.
Was it Last Night on Earth where it turned out that Bruce or Thomas Wayne had done something to Joe Chill's family?
Yeah.
Maybe he killed one of his family members when he was drunk. Yeah,
there was some, yes, you're right. There was some little retcon there and that's not needed. You can just have these characters be who they are. And as a result, you see that this is a very powerful story. We will remember this 10 years from now. We won't remember that weird Thomas Wayne retcon.
Yeah. So those are the three big highs for me that really stood out in my mind in this story. Is there another high for you, or one or two that you needed to point out before we get kind of to the lows and the things where I it didn't feel right?
No, I think we hit it. Just the art's very good. The pacing, I think, was strong. It was nice to see Batman in a detective story solving a mystery. We don't get a lot of that, and I just really appreciate that they went there for this book.
Mm-hmm. So getting into the lows for me, the one that really stands out is it felt so forced and unnecessary to the story. It really ended up not meaning anything, is the weird romance between Jason Todd and Barbara Gordon. I'm not opposed to them having a romance, but the way it's portrayed in here, it kind of happens. They mention it later, and then there's an epilogue about it. It's like, why did you even waste the pages? Because you didn't explore anything. You didn't do anything with it.
Yeah.
Other than, I guess, if you've been through trauma, maybe there would be a physical connection or emotional connection.
Yeah, I think there's that, and I think the goal there was to really kind of portray Jason Todd as adding kind of additional trauma to his character. Here's another case where, you know, he, because of the path he took, because of the what happened to both characters, then there's unable to be a connection where, you know, there may have been or should have been or wanted to have been a connection. And it gives him another kind of dark, shadowy aspect. It keeps him as an outsider to the Bat family, and I don't mind. I think it was interesting to explore. The problem with that is that it really all kind of came and ended within this book. It wasn't really picking up on any past plots or anything. And if if it was tying in some of those moments, that would have been far stronger. But instead, it just kind of came and went really, really suddenly. And so as a result, it was an interesting thing to toy with, but ultimately, nothing really attached to it.
Yeah, nothing really gained. The second thing that I thought, I really liked the characterization, the interaction with the Bat family. But when obviously Jason Todd murders one of the Jokers in the very first book, Barbara Gordon witnesses, and there's some conflict between her and Batman on what to do about it. And it kind of feels like Batman feels a sense of guilt about Jason Todd. But ultimately, we find out in the third issue that the reason that he's not doing anything about it is because if he were to take Jason Todd in, he would eventually have to expose his own identity.
Yeah.
This didn't feel like Batman.
No, I didn't like that at all. I agree. I think that, and that's another case of a panel that just didn't need to be written. Like it was
already ambiguous enough where you could kind of interpret it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was much more solid when Batman was, there was this kind of inner wrestling of maybe I didn't do enough for Jason. I sent him on this path, and how do I properly handle it, and all the rest. And I think that was compelling and meaty. I think that this idea that, well, if I turn him in, it will potentially harm my identity. That is not the Batman character, and it feels very unheroic at that moment. And I think that was a bad call. And I think they had the answer already in the comic, and they decided to add more for no reason.
Yeah, I was like, man, this completely changes the way this doesn't feel like heroic at all. But then the last thing, probably my biggest issue, is it's called Batman 3 Jokers. I thought this was going to be an exploration also about the Joker himself. How are there 3 Jokers? What does that mean? Something transcendent, something... like a revelation about Joker, the character himself. And I don't think that this comic book delivers that. In the end, it's the same old Joker plot that he's messing with Bruce, toying with him because he wants to be the most important thing ever to Bruce.
Yeah. So that's a tough one because I agree and disagree with you. On one hand, I appreciate that the idea of the Joker messing with Bruce and all the rest of that stuff, it does ring true to their dynamic and everything else. And so that's good. The characterization is right. Also, I think this is a case file. It's kind of the case file of the 3 Jokers. So it's a case. It's a moment in time. It's not anything bigger than that. And I think that's where maybe the fact that this was hyped and the fact that it was so long
my
delayed,
own expectations got in my way, probably.
Exactly. Like if you thought about this as imagine if this was just in a comic. And this was a 3, or I guess with the extra pages, a 6-issue arc that just ran in Detective Comics. We'd probably be very just happy with it as being a case, a weird kind of case. But the fact that this became an event, it became this delayed thing, it had so much weight, you're expecting more to come out of it. And so this idea of it being, okay, so what really happened at the ending? Nothing, that feels like we were denied some kind of bigger revelation about the character. And so I'm with you there. I think we were denied this kind of bigger evolution of the Joker. But I also think it was never intended to give us that. And the delays and the hype kind of, put us in that position.
Interesting take. I just expected more, like I said at the very big opening. I think I might have been a victim of my own expectations. Mm-hmm. Now, for you personally, these are the 3 things that stood out to me as maybe disappointing, besides some of the bigger topics that we brought up at the beginning. Is there something else that you thought was like a low moment in the story, or just something that didn't add up for you?
Well, I mean, less than the story and more of it. It felt like through the course of this thing that DC kind of, I don't want to say abandoned the project, but they really... they have so much going on. You have the Joker War going on simultaneously. I think it's terrible for scheduling. I think you have
Death Metal.
Yeah, you have Death Metal, and you have all this other stuff. So what you see is what happened is this was a huge seller. And I think if the numbers ever fully come out and are public, we'll learn that the 3 Jokers was their strongest book for each month that came out, by probably a wide margin. And I think that tells the DC what the fans are interested in. They're interested in these kind of very true to character, deep studies, compelling plot and everything else. That's what the fans are asking for. And the fact that they keep messing around with reboots and retcons and continuity shifts and all this other crap, it it's like they're almost underselling the value that they could have got out of this book. Now, it will sell well and do well, but DC could have, I think, done much more and gotten much more out of this as a story. But instead, it started to take the feel of them just kind of, well, it's finally here. Let's shove it out the door.
We have to do it.
We have to do it. We got all this other stuff going on, so we just kind of have to get this thing done. And I think that, one, it tells me they're not going to learn the lesson of why this book was so successful, and two, it means that some of the nice character development work that was set up here is going to pretty much go out the window and not matter. I mean, we already know from Batgirl, none of this matters. She's going to be a senator now, and it's all good. And Jason Todd's off doing his thing, and Batman's defunded. So I mean, it's like, that's the problem, is that you have this really cool time capsule book that will be a time capsule rather than core to their company.
Yeah, it's interesting. It does fall in line with some of the traditions at DC Comics, where you have these great creative teams come out there. They tell an amazing Batman book. Doesn't exactly fit in with continuity. And then they look back on it and they're like, well, we wish this was a part of continuity. Let's force it in there.
Yep. Yeah, as much the Killing Joke for that matter. And I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how this rolls out. But it was by and large a good book. If you didn't pick this up, I think you should. It is going to be a book that 10 years from now you'll be able to read this thing, I think, as one event, and it will feel like a very good classic character study for these characters. And so, I mean, all in all, it was good. I would love a lot more of this from companies, please.
This is definitely what I expected when they announced Black Label. Premier writers with premier artists, premier characters, Elseworld stories, being able to tell the best stories. This was kind of what we were promised. I don't think we've been given that all that often, but it is nice getting it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, what's your letter grade? I stick with an A-. It's close.
I think A-. I agree. There's a couple flaws, but I think time will heal a lot of those flaws. So I think it's an A- of a story. I think if that ending had been different, I probably would have graded an A. And I think that it's one of the best comics that came out this year. And yeah, I mean, I'm a sucker for character, strong character studies, and this book delivered.
Absolutely. Well, Perch, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. And I love doing these wrap-ups. It's always fun.
Yeah, me too. Thanks for having me on.